Welcome to Two Way Tonight. This little program we call Two Way Tonight. We call it that because it's on the platform Two Way, and it occurs at night in the East Coast. I'm extremely sensitive to how insensitive it is to call it tonight. In LA, for instance, it's not tonight. Hawaii, not tonight. London, middle of the night. So I've always been a little reluctant to call it Two Way Tonight, but that's what it's called. So welcome to it. Thank you for joining. Incredible episode coming up for you tonight for a variety of reasons, including we'll be joined by someone who's not just an extraordinary voice on this platform, Batya Ungar-Sargon of Newsweek, but she actually likes it. So it's as if she's endorsing a product she really uses, right? Like she came on and she said, I love Colgate. And she actually used Colgate. That's the metaphor I'm going with. So she'll join us to talk about a bunch of stuff. And then there are going to be some surprises and a special night here. I didn't give any warning because I only wanted to reward those who came without the inducement. If you get called on tonight, and please raise your hand if you just want to address this point, I want to hear from you tonight. What's something about two-way you'd like to have changed, subtracted, added, altered? All right? So if you got some suggestions about how to improve two-way for your own picayune interests, hopefully you'll suggest something that will be more to the liking of thousands, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, millions. But if it's just something you want, like talk more about the Red Sox, whatever. So please raise your hand if you just want to give a quick little do more of this, do less of this, whatever. And if you ask a question tonight, mandatory, you offer some suggestion. It's my way of doing market research for free. But you know how much you're paying to watch these two ways right now? The same price. So please get ready to contribute some idea of how we can make two-way, I'll say it, even better. Because if you didn't think it was good, you wouldn't be here. So it's not how to take it from nothing to something, but make it better, uplift. As former United States Senator and presidential candidate John Ashcroft used to say, we want to be at our highest and best, not our lowest and least. One of the best presidential slogans I ever heard, and he was an abject failure as a presidential candidate, which goes to show you either that he was a horrible political athlete or political slogans don't matter, or maybe both. But a very nice guy. And again, I'll repeat the slogan, fantastic slogan. He said, America should be at its highest and best, not its lowest and least. And that's my attitude towards this platform. We want to be at our highest and best. All right, not much Trump news today, unlike yesterday when he had his endless press conference. Now, typically during the program, he starts emailing out personnel announcements. So stay tuned for that. It could happen again tonight. But big news on Capitol Hill in this sense. Trump nominees continue to flood meetings, mostly with Republicans, but some Democrats, and get very favorable reviews. Now, these tweets coming from across the Republican conference, including some suspiciously enthusiastic tweets from Rand Paul. I say suspiciously enthusiastic because he's not usually, in my experience, all that enthusiastic a guy. He's kind of low key. These tweets might be happening organically, but my sense is there may be at least a little bit turtle on a fence post organized, and they're certainly organized in retweeting, which is to say the Trump communications team is retweeting them. I see the same tweets over and over because I'm following different people. Very favorable. Sometimes they're saying, the Republicans saying, I'm endorsing so-and-so, or I'll vote for so-and-so, but it's typically just very favorable language because we're now in the mode where they all figured out, don't endorse now. Don't say you'll vote for them now, because that disrespects your own process. Wait for the hearings. And it also gives cover to the ones who are against the nominees secretly, or at least for now, because if their colleagues are not saying, I'm voting for nominee X, then they don't have to either. And the Republicans who want to vote for, say, Hegseth, don't want to put pressure on the ones who don't, for the most part. It's not a universal. But that's why you're seeing some, but not a lot of, I'm voting for X, but just very supportive. This one caught my eye. Please put up the John Thune tweet. John Thune, of course, going to be the majority leader in this new Congress. And he met today with one Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Megyn Kelly calls him RFKJ, which I like quite a bit, RFKJ. John Thune, according to CNN, quote, I think he's done a good job, speaking of RFKJ, answering a lot of the questions about his views on vaccine, Thune tells somebody from CNN. But I think he understands the value and benefit that vaccines play and have played through the years preventing disease. Asked if he's personally comfortable with where Kennedy is on vaccines, Thune said, I think he did a really nice job in kind of explaining his overall philosophy and kind of how that translates on some of the specific issues. Very South Dakota to say kinda. Um, Again, not an endorsement, but if you're Team Kennedy or Team RFKJ, got to be very excited to read that supportive language. And that's the way it was on Capitol Hill today, at least as reflected in my Twitter feed. Lots of Republican senators ending their private courtesy calls with Trump nominees of various types, and then racing to the closest keyboard to tweet out, X out their enthusiastic support, pleasure to meet them messages, not necessarily saying they'll vote for them. Powder is being kept dry, but again, this is another manifestation of the Team Trump's very organized efforts to get their more controversial nominees confirmed, and another brick in the wall of Tom Cotton's prediction that they'll all be confirmed, which again is currently my base case. All right. The Vice President of the United States, the incumbent Vice President, Kamala Devi Harris, did one of her most significant speeches of the post-election period today in Washington to young people, kind of trying to inspire them and rev them up. Got 4 great sound bites. I'm not sure we're going to watch them all, but we're going to watch some of them, and then we'll talk about it and see what you think. See if you think she's her head's in the right place to be performing the role that Democrats want to perform. Oh, good time to remind you before I show these clips of the Vice President, we extend the presumption of grace to all here, and we believe in peace, love, and understanding. So if you're not a huge Harris fan and you hear something in this clip that sounds like maybe some lettuce, some carrots, some avocado, swirled around maybe with a light vinaigrette, maybe even a champagne vinaigrette. Remember, peace, love, and understanding extended to the Vice President of the United States. Roll number 1, please.
Holidays. Spend time with the people you love. You know, I believe family comes in many forms. There's family by blood and there's family by love. I urge you then, after you have had some rest, in fact, I challenge you to come back ready to chart our path to the future. Chin up, shoulders back, forever impatient for change, and like Sasha, ready to summon your drive, your energy, your passion to help our fellow Americans and be ready to get back to work, fighting for opportunity and freedom, fighting for fairness and dignity, and fighting for this country we love and the future we share. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
All right. That was the end, but we're going to go back. Now, I'm going to tell you a quote that sticks in my head. I'm not saying it's the least bit applicable to what we just saw, all right? This is potentially unrelated. I remember once Bill Clinton, I think this is in one of my books, Bill Clinton was asked about Mitt Romney, and he said, that man should not have a job that requires him to talk in public. Okay? That's just a Bill Clinton quote randomly popped in my head. Play number 2, please.
And I ask you to remember the context in which you exist. Yeah, I did that. I ask you to remember that this struggle is not new. It goes back nearly 250 years to Lexington and Concord. Generation after generation, it has been driven by those who love our country, cherish its ideals, and refuse to sit passive while our ideals are under assault.
All right, Patty, I'm going to unmute you. Do you remember that Bill Clinton line about Mitt Romney? What was that line? Do you remember that?
No, but it's perfect.
Yeah. He shouldn't have a
Perfect.
job. He shouldn't have a job that requires him to speak in public. All right, Patty, I was hoping you'd remember because I didn't want to have to say it myself. All right, Patty is going to come back later, maybe, but you didn't deliver the line for me. Feel sad. All right, so that's the vice president. We're not going to show you the other two sound bites because they're very evocative of that. Continuing to wait to see who gets in to run for DNC chair. As I've said before, my spidey sense tells me that Ben Wickler, of the chair of the Wisconsin State Party, is going to win this thing. But so far, the field is made up of men, and people are sort of waiting to see, like, any ladies getting into this field because they're a big part of the Democratic Party, obviously. One person who'd been touted as a potential candidate is a Democrat with a national following. I would argue one of the most famous state senators in modern American history. Her name's Mallory McMorrow. If you're a fan of MSNBC, for instance, you've seen her a lot. And she was talked about as potentially throwing her proverbial hat in the proverbial ring. Today, shocking, Democrats across the country. She put this video on TikTok. Roll the tape, please.
After weeks of conversations and a lot of thought really about the best way to make an impact over the next 4 years, I have decided not to run for DNC chair at this time. Here is my theory of the case. 2024 showed us that Democrats are not lacking in infrastructure. We showed we can raise more money, knock more doors, send more texts, make more phone calls than Republicans. But the gap is that when we got there, people did not want to hear from us. And this is a much larger conversation about message and culture. Are our candidates authentic? How do we communicate? What do we communicate about? Are we really listening to people so that when we get there and ask for their vote, they want to hear from us and they're going to trust that we have their best interest at heart? There are a lot of ideas that I have circulating about tapping into the incredible network of Democrats we have all across this country in elected office at all levels of the ballot to help uplift their voices, get into the cultural conversation, and really change the narrative. And that is something that I think I can do better outside of the position of DNC chair. I've got a lot of ideas in mind, and there is a lot more to come. But I want to thank everybody, DNC members and everybody on the outside who took time to take my phone call, who had really wonderful conversations with me. We're going to do some great things moving forward.
I have to say, I don't really understand her explanation. Seems like she could do a pretty good job as DNC chair, but she's taking a pass. All right, a few more things. AOC, Congresswoman Cortez, lost in her bid to take over the ranking membership of a key committee. Unlike some of the other younger insurgents who have beaten favored, more seasoned, more experienced senior Democrats, she lost one of the first losses really for her in a high-profile sort of political effort. So we'll see what that does to the trajectory of her career. Continues to be talked today about ABC News' decision to settle the case with Donald Trump, who sued the network and George Stephanopoulos for George's failure to correctly characterize what Donald Trump had been found liable for. And there's a lot of chatter about it, a lot of discussion. Continues to be concern on the left that the reason ABC settled was because they wanted to kowtow to Trump. I continue to believe that they were worried about discovery. I don't know that from my reporting, but that's what my spidey sense says on that one. But in any event, it continues to be a problem. There's a New York Post story you can look at that claims that George Stephanopoulos has various views about the settlement. I've known George for a long time. I'm sure he doesn't like this one bit on multiple levels. I can say that with some degree of confidence, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. And then finally, a great lesson for me in humility and caution and the presumption of grace and peace, love, and understanding. This morning on the morning meeting. Now, I don't know if you ever watched the morning meeting. It's a little bit raucous. It's like a less serious Animal House. And Sean and Dan and I banter. According to the dial-o-meters, our ratings go through the roof when we when we rag on each other and behave like savages. So now I'll get serious. This morning, we made fun of the fact that President Biden was going back to Delaware on a Tuesday night. Uh, we thought like to take off for Christmas. And it turns out, according to the New York Times, that in fact he's going back to commemorate the anniversary of the death in a car crash of his first wife and their daughter. So I'm sorry that we made fun of him. I'm sorry that we spoke out of ignorance. And whatever else you think about Joe Biden, the unspeakable horror of losing a spouse and a child like that is just, it's just hard to fathom. So it's a good lesson. And if Sean and Dan aren't watching, somebody will convey this to them. Although I know Dan knows because he's the one who pointed out to me what the New York Times said. So with that, again, if you're watching on YouTube, so glad to have you here. If you're inclined to write something snarky, write it on your refrigerator magnet. Don't write it in the chat. And if you're here on two-way, same deal. Stay out of the chat with garbage. But do raise your hand if you've got questions. We'd love to have you. And remember tonight, we'd love for you to raise your hand to just tell us something you'd like to see changed about two-way, more of something, less of something, eliminate something. You don't want Dan on anymore, for instance. That's a acceptable thing to offer up. But please raise your hand, even if you don't want to ask a question, but if you've got a recommendation, please do that, and we'll get to you in just a moment. But first, I'm excited to say, returning to one of her favorite shows, or at least so she says, from the hallways of Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon, welcome back. How much do you like Two Way? Is that just a PR thing to get on the program, or you really like it?
I love this show so much. I watch the morning meeting almost every day. I try whenever I can to catch the evening show. I feel like it's a kind of like a Dayenu situation. There's this song Jews sing on Passover, which is Dayenu, like it would have been enough if God had only done this or that. And I feel like it would have been enough if it was just you, Mark, with all of your sources and your fairness. And I mean, this apology was so beautiful, but just that kind of fair and balanced nature you bring to the news. But then there's also this gorgeous debate between Sean and Dan, who are both gems. And then there's also the audience brought in to have their say. And I'm so jealous I didn't come up with this, but I couldn't have because it's so brilliant. But I love, 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 love what you're doing. And I'm so honored to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, we're delighted to have you back. Set a good example for everyone before we kick around the news. What's something you'd like changed about Two Way?
I can't think of a single thing.
Oh, come on. That's a horrible example. Make something up. Say you want more cooking segments, something.
Oh, I would not say no to that.
Okay, cooking. I'm planning it. All right. I want to ask you, thank you again for making time and joining, and thank you for being so supportive of the platform. How are Trump's cabinet nominees looking to you? Do you agree with Tom Cotton that they're on track, or do some of them seem like they still might have some speed bumps?
I think it's looking pretty good. I couldn't help but notice John Fetterman tweeting very positively about a meeting he had with Pete Hegseth and then with Tulsi Gabbard today, and saying that this is my job, is to, consider these people and give them a real hearing. It's very hard for me to imagine him saying no to RFK Jr. So I just feel like there's a building support, and seeing all of these people coming and kissing the ring, whether it's the Silicon Valley tycoons or foreign leaders of foreign governments, that's got to have an influence and an impact on the Democrats as well as the Republicans. There is this feeling that it's so amazing. They tried so hard to portray Donald Trump as a great divider, when what he did was he really came out and united, especially working class Americans. And so I just think that if the Democrats have learned anything from this sort of very embarrassing defeat, it's got to be that this is not business as usual. Donald Trump in 2016 was not a one-time thing. They need to change the way that they do things. And I think that starts with being a little bit more open to the things he's proposing, especially the left-wing things he's proposing, things that used to be left-wing ideas, like caring about health, caring about the border, tariffs, trade deals that favor working class people. Like, for them to vote against people who are coming up and saying, I'm here to impose tariffs, to me is an insane thing for a Democrat to do. But I guess we'll see.
What do you think of the current trajectory of Vice President Harris, President Biden finishing up their term? Does it seem sad to you? Does it seem helpful to the Democrats? How do you think about how they're sort of closing out here?
I mean, Biden just sort of disappearing into the sunset with a few final sort of middle fingers here and there. It's so sad. I can't think of any word but sad. And that's
Yeah.
since the debate. I mean, since the way that they humiliated him again and again. I mean, of course, he chose to run. He insisted he could do it. But after that, when, the Obama Clooney wing decided he couldn't beat Trump, the ritual humiliation of an elderly person was unbearable to me to watch. And I just think he has come to see himself in that light as well. And I don't think he was a good president. I think he made a lot of mistakes. I think he keeps making mistakes, but it's unbearably sad to me to see this kind of public display, this public disgrace of a person because he took away power from people who crave it more than anything else.
He seems intent, as you said, on sort of closing out with some stuff, and his administration keeps promoting different things, executive orders, and they did some stuff today, like with junk fees, and I think they said today, I saw this on my news alert, that they're making mandatory seatbelt bells in the back seat coming up in like a few years, which some of us will love, some of us maybe not. What about a deal with with Hamas and Israel? Is that something that you think is likely to happen before Inauguration Day, or everybody's going to hold out for Trump?
So Hamas conveyed in the last round, very recently, that they were going to be willing to make two concessions that they have not been willing to make before. The first is they would allow IDF soldiers to stay in Gaza, which they've never allowed before as part of a deal. And the second was they gave a list, apparently, of names of hostages that they would be willing to release. So they are scared. Obviously, Trump's tweet about how he's going to be raining down hellfire upon them has scared them. The question, I think, there's two questions here. The first is whether they can get to a deal, whether Netanyahu wants to get to a deal now in this kind of, or if he thinks he can get a better deal with Trump. But also, I think from Biden's point of view, obviously, if a deal gets made now, Trump is going to get all the credit. Now, I don't think, God forbid, that would be playing in Biden's conscious mind. But in terms of the resources being put towards something, surely unconsciously, that's not a negligible factor.
Yeah.
What do
Marco
you think?
Rubio,
Do you think it's likely?
I go back and forth. I think probably not. I think they'll probably wait to see what happens with Trump. But I also could imagine, uh, kind of like what happened with Carter and Reagan and the hostages, that there's just some sort of dynamic that says, you know what, Trump's a wild card. Let's just do it now
Hmm.
because we
Hmm.
know what the Biden, broker deal is. So I tend to think not, but I don't rule it out. And that's a squishy answer, but that's my honest appraisal. My rationally, I think it'll wait for Trump, but I think it'll happen soon after Trump takes office.
Hmm.
Um, if there is some sort of deal that requires a peacekeeping force in Gaza, do you have a sense of who would provide those forces?
This is a really hard question.
Yeah,
One of the main problems for the Palestinians is that the other Arab nations use them as a political pawn whenever things are going, to shit with
yeah,
the Arab street in their countries, but they do not give two shits about these people, except
right.
insofar as they can use them for their political ends. They do not care about them, and they thus do not care to assume the massive responsibility of policing them, which is a massive responsibility. One of the sort of very ironic things that happened early on was as Israel made clear that they were starting this invasion into northern Gaza, there was obviously zero pressure from the international community, but from Americans, there was this question of was Egypt going to open up Sinai to allow people to flee? And the answer was no. Not a single
Yeah,
Palestinian was going to be allowed to cross the border into Gaza. Not one grandmother, not one 90-year-old woman, not one baby was going to be allowed to cross that border. So certain are the Egyptians that, of the worst stereotypes of the Palestinians that they're true. So
yeah,
I don't, the obvious answer for me would be Saudi Arabia, would be for them to step up and say, look, we're going to start normalization with Israel. We're going to start this process. And as a measure of goodwill, we're going to assume responsibility for that. I don't think they're going to do that. The other answer would be Qatar. I mean, people don't realize this, but 80% of people living in Qatar are foreign workers. It's absolutely disgusting that these people host Hamas and do nothing for the Palestinian people. And this is really one of my biggest criticisms of Joe Biden. In 2021, he randomly, I don't know why, I mean, maybe you have reporting on this, decided to make Qatar a major non-NATO ally for reasons that were never made clear. What did we get in exchange for that? Bubkiss, we got nothing. There were American hostages held by Hamas who could have been released at any moment if Qatar had put pressure on them. We got nothing out of that. And I think that's just so par for the course with this administration.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I suspect we got something related to intelligence, some sort of listening post, or, we have a base there, right? Or at least one base.
It's actually the biggest base in the Middle East.
Yeah. So we've just that one big one, or we have other ones?
I think it's just the big one.
All right, maybe it's just the one. But I bet you we got something having to do with intelligence, would be my guess. But I agree with you. That relationship, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what they get away with. And they pay all this to have influence in the U.S. I mean, it's nuts. How about Dutch? How about Dutch troops in Gaza? That's what I think would.
I don't have an opinion on. I don't know anything about that.
I don't think the Saudis will do it. I want some peace-loving European nation to do it. I don't think the Saudis will. All right, couple more questions. Then we're going to go to your questions. Please raise your hand if you'd like to get in the conversation. If you're here in the two-way platform, as always, we want to know where you're from. We'd love to hear your suggestion for two-way. It should not involve a cooking segment because that's been made. Do you follow this lady in Michigan, Mallory McMorrow? Do you follow her at all? No. All right. So she's that state senator who took herself out of the DNC rank. I know you follow AOC, your fellow New Yorker. What do you think this loss of this job she wanted does to the skyrocket trajectory of her career? Is this a blow, or too soon to say, or not a blow at all?
From the Democrats' point of view, they often say about the Palestinians, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Yeah. That's how I feel about the Democrats right now. Elevating AOC in this moment would have been such a smart move. And I don't say that as somebody who agrees with much of what she says. But as you guys talked about this morning, she has that authenticity. She is a populist. I don't think she's a good populist, but she cares about people, and people know that there were tons of people who voted for AOC and for Donald Trump. That is the kind of politician who you want to be elevating right now if you're the Democrats, somebody who can talk to working class people, who can make people feel excited. You don't have to agree with her about everything, but to say to a young up and coming superstar, you have a place in this party. We're going to elevate you. We're going to make sure that you feel like you're being heard and listened to, and then hopefully we'll be heard and listened to, and together we can remake this party. This was the moment for that. And of course, the Democrats absolutely missed it. I don't think this hurts. The problem with her career trajectory is, where does she go from here, right? It's very hard for me to imagine her winning a Senate race in New York. So does she then just go straight for president? I don't know. I don't think she can win a presidential campaign, but that's why this would have been a really great assignment for her, because it would have really been a kind of a big leap forward, a higher position, more authority, and then see, can she moderate? Can she work with other people in the party to get some of these more populist positions on the left pass through? For her, I think the smartest thing she can do right now is take a page out of Bernie Sanders' playbook and start making deals with Republicans, start making amendments, find the populists on the other side. There is so much overlap between an AOC and a Josh Hawley. If she can put down all of the identity stuff and just look at the economics, that's what I want to see her do, because her party is never, ever going to return to those populist roots. If she can get her head out of wanting to please the activists in her party and the activists who follow her, and think about, the working class people who are in her district. I mean, actually, I think the majority of her district is gentrifiers, but if she can think about the working class people who are being underrepresented, she will find a lot of people in Trump's MAGA party to make deals with. And I think that's the move that she should pursue. I don't think she will, but I think she should if she's listening.
Is a majority really gentrifiers? That would surprise me.
I think the majority of people who vote for her she wins with the gentrifiers, and she has a big Queens. I think it's Astoria is in her district.
Yeah.
And of course, rich people vote much more than working class and poor people.
Yeah.
So
I should know more about her constituency. They're my neighbors than I do, but I'll look into that. All right. Thank you again for joining us. Let's bring folks in. Again, I'll be stern about this. Start by telling us where you are and something about two-way you'd like changed. Add, subtract, multiply, whatever it is. And let's start with the very, very thoughtful Joseph Norman.
Oh, thank y'all for having me.
Thank you for coming back. Tell folks who don't remember where you're from.
I live in Southwest Louisiana,
Yes, sir.
and my one suggestion would be I'd love for you to have Dan Abrams on. I listen to him
Okay.
every day, and he seems to follow the ethos here where he just tries to call balls and strikes.
All right.
So,
Lori, let's try to get my friend Dan Abrams on. You probably know him pretty well. Lori's my colleague who going to go for that. All right. Thank you for that suggestion. Micro, but we're good for micro. What's on your mind tonight, sir?
well, I was just thinking about the Ann Seltzer suit that Trump filed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm struggling because I know you had her on and she seemed so thoughtful and nice.
She's
And it
both
sounds
those
like
things.
she just had a bad poll. And so I'm struggling because I didn't want Trump to win, but I'm trying to be open-minded and I want the country to succeed and I want him to succeed. But I'm just struggling because, like, I want someone to explain to me how it's not hypocritical to run on a platform of lawfare and then go around suing pollsters.
Yeah. Great question. I'll answer second. Bacha, you go.
I thank you so much for that question, Joseph. It's really thoughtful. I don't like it either. I think, Mark, it was you who said that it took a lot of guts for Anne to release the poll. Like most people who got a poll like that would just not have released it because it was too much of a crapshoot. Either she was
Yeah.
going to be prescient or it was going to be really, really wrong. And it turns out it was really, really wrong. I don't think she did anything wrong. She was, she was courageous and she released it. So I hopefully this will get dismissed. Like that's my only hope. But I agree with you, Joseph. I'm not thrilled to see Trump pursuing that. I don't think it's like, the defamation stuff. It's just feels sort of petty and mean. What do you think, Mark?
Well, Anne is my friend, and I have incredible respect for her, and so I don't like to see her, in the spotlight like this. But on the merits, it's like it's not election interference. She wasn't trying to interfere with the election, nor did she. There are plenty of polls, and if you look at margin of error and you look at Anne's track record to suggest there's any indication that this was anything but what happens to the best of pollsters, a bad poll, there's just no proof or even hint of that. So Donald Trump's welcome to be litigious. I think, suing ABC worked out well for him, and I think there was some merit to trying to hold them accountable because the press is too cavalier about smearing people. But this one I don't like one bit, and as some of you know, I make it a practice not to predict what juries, judges, or justices will do. But I think this case will be dismissed well before it gets anywhere. I think it'll be dismissed on first contact. Joseph, thank you for coming. Thank you for the question. You can go watch my interview with Ann anytime you want, on demand, for the low, low price of nothing on our YouTube page. Please do that. Bella, welcome in. Thank you for coming. Remind folks where you are. Tell us what's.
I'm from New York. Did
Yeah.
I unmute? I'm from New
Yeah.
York. And the one thing I would change is when after the names you say you voted for Trump so that's sort of like a box because I'm a Democrat and it says Trump. So
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
notice
voted
I've stopped asking people to do that. We did that in the run-up to the election, but now I
Right.
leave it up to people to say what they want. I just want to know where you are so I can
I'm in New
geo
York.
you.
I'm
New
in
York.
New York and
Yeah.
Westchester, and I listen
Yeah.
to Batya all the time.
Yeah.
And I only raised my hand now because of this AOC comment.
Yeah.
AOC is not a populist. She's a TikTok generator. I mean, I remember when she was trying to figure out how to work the garbage disposal, and that gave her such a high profile thing. And she didn't care about the workers because she stopped Amazon from opening in Queens. She really put a knife, I work in Queens, and some of those small business people couldn't believe it that she would turn away, Amazon work, the local restaurants were all like sprucing up,
Yeah.
and so she's not a populist.
Yeah.
She's an empty suit. And as a I'm one of those Democrats, like the diagram that Musk made. I'm standing here as a
Yeah.
Democrat, and the Democrats are going like this. So I'm where I always was.
Yeah.
And
Bella, thank you for that. Super interesting. Before I let Batya respond, you said you watch Batya all the time. Where do you watch her work?
honestly, she does the thing with Moynihan. I got
Hmm.
to her because of Fifth Column, the same way I got
Yeah.
to you. And I
Yeah.
told you I don't like to talk about the drinking so much on that, but
Yeah.
who
The
they
fifth,
are.
the fifth,
They are honest.
those fifth column guys, they define authenticity.
Right.
They
That's it.
are what they are what they are.
And
Batya, more on AOC. What about her blocking of Amazon in Queens and just her general positioning? What are your thoughts there? And Bella, thank you for the question.
Um, I feel really mind divided about Amazon. I've met a lot of Amazon workers who really, it's like the best job they ever had. And then I've met a lot of people who, especially if you're a picker, that job seems like a really horrible job. Their policy of pushing people out after 2 years seems pretty bad. The union busting, I'm a big union supporter, but what gets called union busting is often seems to me like totally fair game and legitimate. I think she made a decision about what she thought would be best for the workers. And I agree with you. She loves the spotlight. I agree with you. She spends a lot of time on social media, but I just feel that she is genuine and wrong. And I don't admire her wrong positions, but when I say she's a populist, I don't think, and I'm curious if you agree with me, Bella, but I don't think that the divide in this country is left versus right anymore. I
no,
th- I
I
think that it's sort of the elites versus the working class, but in people, in politicians, in discourse, there's two versions of what it means to be on the bottom end of things. So it's obvious that like the Kamala stuff, like, that this is all kind of geared at elites, all this like uplift language is, go home and do your self-care before you come back out and try to help the plebs, right? That's all obviously gross. But I think what the squad was supposed to be was a left-wing version of what's the left today version of how do we care about people who have less than us? Now, I disagree with their version because I think their version is distributionist in nature. Their view is we're well off and there's a lot of people who aren't. Let's raise, the bar on what's considered poor and just raise taxes on rich people like us. Rich leftists love paying taxes. Let's raise taxes on people like us and we'll redistribute it, right? We'll give all of these working class people who are struggling public housing. We'll give them SNAP benefits. We'll redistribute this money to people who would have been working class but are poor because of the economy that the Democrats created, and we'll help them that way. Now, Trump's model is different. He says, no, let's create a protectionist economy, like by limiting the supply of labor, by controlling the border, by making better trade deals that favor American workers, and then people who work will naturally make more money, and having more money will have more access. So they'll be able to buy houses, they'll be able to buy food, they'll be able to buy healthcare. It's two models. Now, I am pretty solidly in the MAGA model. I think Trump really nailed it. And I think most working class people agree with him. They want that. But that is not to say that there is not a genuinely felt version of the Democrat side. I think it's wrong. I don't think it resonates with workers, but I think she genuinely feels it. That's the case I would make to you.
I mean, the model that you're proposing that these squad people are that's an old model. That's a 1968. We or the academics rose, the students rose up and were trying to change society, and that hasn't worked. I don't believe the squad is about that. I believe the squad is about putting themselves on high profile in order to generate their own political careers. I don't think any of them really care about the working class. If they did, all those small business guys in Queens would have more business today.
I hear you.
Bella, thank you for expressing that. It's not a universally held view, but it's a common one. I appreciate you being on. Matthew, welcome in. Before you say anything
Thank you,
else,
Mark.
how are you gonna fix two-way?
I would love to get an agenda in advance of the week with who you actually are planning to feature as a guest, because I can't always make your show, but when you have people like Batya on, I will rearrange my calendar to make sure that I actually have the opportunity to hear the show and to talk to her and ask a question.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to respond to that by saying thank you. I hear you. I see you. We're going to do our best to fulfill that, and
Great.
it's a good suggestion. So thank you. Appointment viewing is key, and ain't nothing more appointment than botcha. Right?
Great.
All right.
So
Where are you,
Batya,
Matthew? For folks who don't know.
I'm in New York City,
Yeah.
probably not far, much different from, not farther north from where you are. I'm on the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
So, Batya, I want to just quibble with a comment that you made about AOC, and I say, and I do so be out of pure affection and respect for what you do. I think that as a Democrat, that AOC is quite frankly a menace. I think that she personifies every trend in the Democratic Party that is going to be destructive to its long-term interests. The perverse fixation with Israel, the elevation of identity politics to a place where it shouldn't be, the fact that the relentless policing of language, all of those trends in the Democratic Party that I really fear are going to end up heralding the future of the party. And that's really one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about, because you seem to have a lot of the same preoccupations that I do. The Jewish vote, the subject of Israel within the two-party system. And what I wanted to know is, so, there have been a tremendous number of articles back and forth about whether the Jewish vote at the presidential level differed at all from its historical patterns. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of debate one way or the other. What I want to understand is, so there had been a lot of predictions about potential realignment of the Jewish vote. Do you see, and I know that you've talked a lot about the realignment of the vote between the Democratic and Republican Party for working class voters. Do you see that there's a possibility of the real profound realignment in the Jewish vote if the Democratic Party, if the trends of the Democratic Party towards this hostility to Israel continue to end up reaching full fruition?
Great question, Matthew. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you so much.
You.
Let me just say on AOC, as someone who follows her very closely, I think you were right about her for the first 2.5, 3 years of her career. I think she's in a very different place right now. Certainly right after the election, she was one of the few people trying to get answers from her voters, honestly, who had voted for Trump and be like, please explain this to me. I want to understand. She took her pronouns out of her bio. Her talk about Israel has moderated. She's nowhere near a Rashida Tlaib or an Ilhan Omar in terms of how often she talks about it. I think she realizes that in New York, that's a kind of non-starter. So I think that she really was that person and is not anymore. To me, it seems like she's trying to focus much more on workers' issues, on populist issues, but I could be wrong. I could just be having I could be like everybody else, just like Trump himself, who admitted that she has a spark and that she's beautiful. It's like, I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see her. I think her tone has really shifted. On the Jewish vote, I don't think there's going to be a realignment. And the reason for that is in a country that has now an entrenched class divide that is now hereditary. So we pass on privilege now, college educated Americans, to their children at a greater, we've approximated the kind of the class lines from, Europe that we try to escape, that we've created this country to escape from. We are now passing on to second and third generations the privilege of having a college education. In a country like that, so 33% of Americans have a college degree. That's the dividing line in this country. But 60% of Jewish Americans have a college degree. And that has been the case since the 50s and 40s, that Jews have had double the rate of a college degree than average Americans. And so they were kind of like woke, like before everybody else, like avant la lettre, like they were already being exposed to this like deconstructionist, postmodernist crap in the early 70s when it first came out at a much higher rate. And so I'm writing my third book now, and it's called Why the Left Left the Jews. But it is very curiously and importantly not called Why the Jews Left the Left, because they will not leave the left, because that college degree is just the number one factor in terms of predicting whether somebody votes Democrat or Republican today. So I really don't, only 4% of Americans vote on foreign policy, and that includes Jews. And I honestly think that's how it should be. We should not be voting on Israel. We are Americans. Like, this is our ancestral homeland. And I'm obviously incredibly pro-Israel, like care a lot about Israel, have a lot of people there, spent a lot of time there. This is my country, and we should be voting on this. And Jews are simply in the group that thinks that wokeness is the answer. They are embarrassed about their privilege. They feel like they are part of the like they've bought into all of this because they go and get the education that teaches you all of this. So I really don't predict much of a realignment at all.
All right. Matthew, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ain't nobody should come on here and say we don't have good enough analysis of Jews in Israel after that. That was a spectacularly sophisticated answer. Thank you for that. My friend Ray. Ray, welcome in. Ray's in Ohio. He's a great journalist, great columnist, and we're always happy to see Ray. Ray, floor is yours.
Oh, I should start with the two things that I would like to see improved, and then
Yes,
I'll
sir.
go to my two quick comments
Yes,
first.
sir.
I'd vote for time limits on comments because you got a lot of smart people here, tremendous diversity of opinion, and the more concise comments, you might get more people to participate, and I would be all for that. And
All right.
secondly, I'd love to hear more far left and far right opinions. I don't agree with Laura Loomer on anything that I've seen her put out, but I found her comments when she was on interesting because it gave me an insight into how she thinks. And for me, that was very valuable.
Yeah.
Two quick comments.
All right, hold on. Before you move on from that, I want to comment on those too. First of all, when people go on too long, it's up to me typically to ask them to stop. And in the spirit of peace, love, and understanding, I generally have a light touch. If I don't think they're interesting, and I'm scanning the faces of the community, if it seems like they've lost the group, I will try to step in. But I'm sensitive to the balance that needs to be struck there. On your second point, I couldn't agree with you more. We want to have voices across the spectrum, and one of the things about the platform that thrills me and sometimes frustrates me is when we have somebody like Laura Loomer on, people on the left, instead of complaining and saying they'll never come on again to watch and participate, should be, as you are, delighted for the opportunity to hear a conversation with somebody like that, who normally, if you hear from them, are in a completely unmediated environment. And that's not, to me, as interesting. So I hope to do more of that. We hope to do more of that. And we hope that if we bring on people you don't agree with, instead of being angry, you should write me a thank you note. Your two comments, Ray.
Two comments quickly. The ABC settlement to me is an extreme example of sloppiness that's engulfing media today, and that's the bigger point. I think people are missing that bigger point.
So you're not unhappy with the outcome because you think it sends a good message. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The Des Moines Register thing.
See how I cut you off there?
That's all right.
Going on too long, right?
I'm going on too long.
Yeah.
The Des Moines Register lawsuit is nonsense. That'll get thrown out. And lastly, I agree with Batya 100%. The Democrats are going to regret sidelighting AOC, regardless of what you think of her. She, to me, looks like the brightest young light of the Democratic Party.
Ray, thank you. Awesome and good example on many fronts. You'll notice Ray offered two suggestions rather than one. That's welcome. Ray, thank you, my friend. Welcome. Anytime, as you know. All right. So much for Ray hogging time, ironically. David, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are. I've unmuted you. I'm lowering your hand. The floor is yours. Start with your suggestion of how to improve this platform.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, David.
My name's David from the Bay Area, California. One suggestion I have is to bring on foreign policy experts, given the state of global affairs. It would be very interesting to bring on to your platform to have two-way type discussions with foreign policy people from the different perspectives of foreign policy.
Yep. David, did you see our recent program with the folks from International Intrigue? Do you see that one?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
All right. So go on YouTube and check it out. They're three former diplomats, all Australians, who write a newsletter that I recommend. And,
yes, that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that. Yes, I did see that. Yes, I did. Thank you.
So is that the kind of thing you're thinking about, or you want more like practitioners of like government officials? Who would be good for you?
Yeah, like Paul McFall, Stanford. Did I say his name correct?
Yeah, Ambassador McFall. I don't think his first name's Paul.
Ambassador
Michael McFall. Yeah, he'd be good. I've tried to book that guy for about 80 years. Never said yes, but we'll keep trying.
Well, when I get to Stanford, maybe I could pop in his office.
All right, do maybe just bring the camera on and just
There it is.
Mike him. All right, that's an excellent
Professor
suggestion.
Mearsheimer.
Yeah, also a good suggestion.
Okay.
Did you want to ask or say something beyond your suggestion about more foreign policy?
Yes, actually, bring it back to domestic is that as a right center persuasion, I listened to that Pod Save America podcast with the head of uh, the campaign heads
Yeah.
of the Harris campaign.
Yes, sir.
Why would they go on there? Because they presented themselves as one, they don't understand the environment they were in. So, and the other thing is that that comment by Mr. Pluff about, well, Kamala was behind, the whole way. If you're the A team, why would you sign up to a campaign where the candidate is behind?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you think it has no chance,
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
give it to the B team.
Yeah. David, has anyone ever told you your voice sounds like Michael Beschloss? Maybe I'm the
No.
only one hearing that. All right. Batya, I've commented at length about the Pod Save America interview, so I'm kicking over to you to address David's point about the apparent lack of awareness that some saw in that interview, and the question of, sort of saying, well, we couldn't win no matter what. What do you think of those points?
I'll make a brief point. I didn't watch the whole interview, just the clips that were circulating, but there was a software that, I don't know if it was a software or a little website you could go to that would tell you the breakdown of your Twitter followers or anybody's Twitter followers by left versus right. It turns out that most conservatives, this was actually, I think this is probably no longer the case because many liberals have fled Twitter in the meantime. It was like 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Most conservatives follow about 50-50. So they're very exposed to liberal ideas and personalities and views. The media, I mean, 96% of journalists who give donations to political parties donate to Democrats. So most media outlets are liberal, leaning left, catering to a Democratic audience. There was a great quote where did I see this? Megyn Kelly read it to you this morning, Mark, from the Semaphore piece, argued that it was a quote from, I think it was Kamala's campaign coordinator, who said, we didn't bother going on cable news because all of their viewers are already voting Democrat, right? Like, and that's a thing that cable news knows. They know who their audience is. They're all Democrats. So conservatives are very exposed to how Democrats see them and a little bit too influenced by it. I think they have this inferiority complex, right? Although, of course, that's changed now that Trump's like the cool one and they're the lame ones. But liberals, you simply cannot understand how ensconced in a little self-congratulatory bubble there. It turned out that same website, if you would put in like the major liberals that you follow, they follow no conservatives. They follow 93% of the people they follow are liberals. So they exist in this bubble. Like I can't even tell you what it was like being at the DNC, like watching these billionaires take the stage for these like crowing crowds, like, and they were saying things that were just so totally impossible to relate to, but the crowd was going wild. Like that is in their mind. When Kamala Harris gets up there and says, like, because hard work is good work, right? Like she's not picturing all of the like 70% of Americans who are like, what are you talking about? She's picturing the 100 people in front of her who are like, yes, queen, and she's picturing Oprah going, Kamala Harris, right? Like they are so in this bubble of Yas queenification, like that they have no clue. They don't talk to regular people. They don't ask their opinions. They don't listen to them. So like, I think it never would have even occurred to them not to go on this very Democrat podcast and admit things that to a normal person are like, I can't believe you're saying that out loud, because they have there's no true mirror to them.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. That's a very interesting conversation, or I'm sorry, very interesting point of view I never even thought about, because it's like, I don't know. If I was, as you said, Mark, they're in the Hall of Fame, but I was like,
they
Hall of
are.
Famers eventually.
Yeah. They're great. They're great. They're great track record. David, thank you for coming on.
Thank you,
Appreciate
David.
it. Please book Ambassador McFall for us. All right. With the clock winding down, I'm going to take an extraordinary risk because that's what this show is about. It's about risk taking. I'm going to bring in two people at once, two men who've never met each other, to my knowledge. You never know. Greg and Sam. And Sam is one of our favorites. Sam has been coming on this program since the 1940s. He's been around and just, we love having Sam on. Sam, are you in Texas? Are you in Texas, Sam?
Dallas, Texas. Yes,
Dallas,
sir.
Texas. Greg, where are you?
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
The former
Greg,
state. Yeah.
Greg, do you eat the chili with the spaghetti?
Yeah. Love it. With beans.
Yeah, with beans. With beans. How about what is it, Grater's ice cream? Is that Cincinnati?
There's
That's good too, right?
There.
2 blocks.
Yeah, scary.
Man, their black cherry is just, I can't believe how good it is.
Mark, I'm all about the salted caramel.
Salted caramel's really good too. Do you ever put extra salt on?
I don't.
Try that. Not a lot, but they undersalt it. It's like almost false advertising. Trump should sue them. Claims it's salt. All right, I'm eating up time. You guys, real quick, one thing you want to change about two-way and one question or comment. Sam will be first, then Greg, both following Ray's dictum. Boom, boom, boom. Botcha's going to answer him, and we're going to end on time. Sam, go.
Botcha, I'm a huge fan. I feel a little starstruck. I've been watching and listening to you since the Hill, Breaking Points, and I think my one suggestion is Botcha needs to be a scheduled regular on the show without question.
All right, Sam, what frequency would you like, Sam?
Daily.
Daily.
Twice
All right.
a day.
Twice a day. All right. I'll botch all the time. All right. That's your recommendation. What's your question or
and
comment?
Sagar and Jetty, for populist right, I really love Sagar, and I think he'd be a great addition to a voice here.
Okay. And did you want to ask a question or just that's it?
Yes. Yeah. So my question is, what do you attribute? It seems like, although this is a very strange transition, what do you attribute the willingness of the Biden administration to allow such major activity to happen on the international stage that completely undermine the plans of the incoming administration? I mean, I get this, the ship has been moving one way, but for the sake of just a smooth transition and for the sake of the world, doesn't it make sense for Joe Biden to lay back a little bit?
Right. So you're saying the Biden folks are doing stuff that seem to be, if inadvertently or inadvertently, tying the Trump folks' hands. Like, why are they doing that? Is that your question? All right.
Absolutely.
Greg, recommendation and question or comment.
All right. David stole my recommendation of more foreign policy. So I'm going to pivot to, there are massive kind of economic and demographic changes going on in Asia, going on in Europe. It's going to change global trade. I've only been listening for 3 or 4 weeks. I stumbled across you guys, fantastic adults talking about policy in a civil way. Where else can you find it, right? So fantastic.
Greg, I'm sorry you missed some of the early Sam episodes. We've watched him grow up together. He's older than he looks, but Sam has evolved. He's changed.
It's moisturized.
Yeah, it's moisturized.
I'm as old as I look, right? So
Greg, and what question or comment?
Question is about Syria. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Shah being deposed and Iran, jumping from the pan to the fire, right? Yeah. Libya, the same thing, right? In some ways, right? It's now a failed state. Is there any reason to have any hope for Syria, or is it going to devolve into a failed state? And my second question is, does the U.S. actually have a national interest in Syria?
All right. Botcha cannot possibly answer all 3 of those in a minute, so we'll go a little bit over. I'll warn our affiliates. Botcha, Biden interference, in air quotes, on Trump, Syria, and American interest in Syria. And 30 seconds on the clock. Go.
I'm going to start with Greg's because I think I can do them faster. So I agree with Trump. I don't think we have a national interest in Syria. I think that was spot on. In terms of the future for Syria, this Jolani character, of course, was part of an Al-Qaeda group before. He has disavowed it. The Taliban also told us that they were going to be a different Taliban. I got burned on that. I was like, let's see, maybe they will be, because I really wanted us to withdraw from Afghanistan. They're exactly the same Taliban. The difference here, I think, is that there is a robust middle class, young middle class of Syrians who are currently in exile. If Jolani can convince them to come back, you have hope for a kind of technocratic state. Like, I think that a lot hangs on whether that middle, of course, you don't have that in Afghanistan. So that's a really big difference. There are young people who feel really close to this country, who really do want to see it succeed, who are more moderate and who are educated. If they can make a big comeback, I think there's hope. If not, less so.
There's a big middle class, sorry to interrupt, but there's a big middle class in Iran as well.
There is a big middle class in Iran.
Very educated, very middle class, and still the same issue. So sorry to interrupt, but I know you're on the clock.
Well, a lot of people do think that there is hope for regime change in Iran from within, from that middle class. I don't know, how much hope there is, but all right. And why is Joe Biden trying to undermine Trump? I mean, of course he is, right? Like, of course he's doing this kind of beta male thing of trying to stab in the back from behind. Like, I don't think we should read too much into it. He's really angry, and he's really angry at everybody because everybody screwed him over. Everybody made a fool of him. And I think that they're just trying to do this whole, what can you do right before he comes in? He's pretending that it's 2015, 2016, and that like we don't actually know what to expect from Trump, but we do. And so I think it's sort of a little bit of a last, middle finger to everybody.
Yeah, but the consequences could be
Yeah.
catastrophic. And that's to me where it becomes like, to what end? Is your ego that big that you're willing to say, I will risk nuclear war just to give a middle finger to my party and my opponent? But yeah, it's just mind-blowing to me.
All right. I wish we had more time. Greg and Sam, both great questions, and Batya could do PhD dissertations on both of your queries. So
Thank you
I'm
guys
sorry we
so
ran out of
much.
time. But thank you both for coming. I hope you both come back regularly. Greg, how'd you find two-way all of a sudden, belatedly?
YouTube, just looking for news.
Yeah.
Right before and after the election, came across
Yeah.
you and John, and was just hooked. So
Great. Greg, thank you. Bring all your friends.
I will.
All right. Thank you so much. Batya, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you,
Apparently,
Mike.
you've got a daily show. Well, that's a start date soon, but very grateful to you whenever you come and join us, and great questions. And we hear people want more foreign policy, and we're working on plans for that, including with our friends at International Intrigue. So thanks to Ray and Greg and Matthew and everybody else, Sam, everybody who asked questions tonight. I'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Sean M. Spicer, and Dan Turrentine and I will be here, and we'll do a morning meeting type of thing. And then in 23 hours, this show will be on again, as inexplicable as that may seem to many of you. Have a good evening. See you at 9 a.m. Batya, thank you.